What were League of Legends abilities like in 2009? Well, let's find out. Over 14 years ago, League of Legends Clash of Fates launched with 40 unique champions for its players to try. Now, most of these champions would be easily recognizable to you and me today, but their kits and abilities were very, very different. I know this because recently I found an archived Riot Games webpage describing the original kits of League's oldest champions. And in today's video, I'm going to share with you 10 abilities on this page I had never seen or heard of before, so we can answer the question, what were League of Legends abilities like in 2009? At number 10 is Ashe with her old E Archer's Mark. It was a passive that said each time Ashe kills a unit, she gains some extra gold. And that amount of gold would go up each time Ashe leveled up the ability. This one is really interesting to me because I feel like Ashe is kind of defined by her Hawkshot. It's such an important ability for her. And the fact that she didn't originally have Hawkshot is wild to me. Like, this is just so much less useful than Hawkshot. Also, kind of a funny thing is the ability icon for Archer's Mark is Teemo's ultimate, which is kind of weird, but I guess they used it twice. I'm really not sure. Next up is Soraka with their old ultimate, Purify. Purify is an active ability which reads, cleanses all debuffs and restores a significant amount of health to a target-friendly unit. I imagine this would have worked pretty similarly to how Milio's ultimate works now, where it's like this massive AoE cleanse, but instead it was just a point-and-click cleanse on one champion. It just feels so weird thinking that Soraka used to not have Wish. Like, Wish is such a integral ability to Soraka, such a foundational part of her kit, and it used to not exist. It used to just be Purify, which is kind of funny. Next up on the list at number 8 is Master Yi with his ultimate Highlander. Now, it shares the same name, but it does something very different. Highlander isn't active again, and it reads, Master Yi enters a trance, where he becomes immune to magic. Additionally, if he is alone, his movement speed is greatly increased. So you know now how Highlander, when you pop it on Master Yi, you're immune to slows, which is great, obviously. But imagine you're not just immune to slows, you're immune to all CC and any form of magic damage. That's what they're referencing here. Basically, any spell thrown at you would do nothing when you were in Highlander. The idea of Master Yi just being completely immune to all CC and magic damage is just so stupid to even think about. Also, super quick, I'm giving away $25 of RP to someone who comments on this video, so make sure to leave a comment and let me know what you think of this list and these crazy abilities. At number 7, we have Tristana and her old W, which was Draw a Bead. It was, again, an active, and it reads, Tristana aims much more carefully, increasing her attack range, but slowing her movement speed. This ability replaces Tristana's current W, her rocket jump. So it kind of completely changes how Tristana would have been played back then. Instead of being an AD carry who like jumps on top of somebody's head and blows them up, she was more of like a artillery AD carry who would, I'm guessing, stand still and just shoot super fast. It's almost like they were trying to make her like a Gatling gun sort of AD carry instead of how she ended up being with the jumps and the resets. Next up at number 6 is Twisted Fate and his Q, which was called Seal Fate. I'm sure most of you know that Twisted Fate has had tons of changes throughout the years where he used to be able to teleport on his E for 30 seconds or whatever the hell, but this ability I think is more interesting because I don't think many people know about it. The ability reads, Twisted Fate reveals the cursed fate of his enemy. That enemy takes periodic damage until the curse runs out or until he can kill an enemy unit. From looking online and doing a bit more research, from how I understand it, this basically was like an ignite. So you would Q someone, they would take damage over time, but if the enemy last hit a creep, the ignite would just stop. It sounds like an interesting minigame when you read it and you think about it, because there's nothing really like that in the game right now, but it sounds awful. Like, I don't think it would be a very good ability at all. It's still kind of a funny piece of Twisted Fate history that isn't usually talked about, though. At number 5, we have Morgana and her old Q, which was still called Dark Binding, but the actual ability was quite different. It was an active, and the ability reads, Morgana channels dark energy into a single enemy, causing immense pain that deals damage each second and slowing its movement speed. From how it sounds, her old Q was like the first part of Soul Shackles now, but with damage over time. And this makes sense because Morgana didn't used to have Soul Shackles as an ultimate. Her old ultimate was called Echoing Pain, which read, any damage done to a target is increased considerably. So she'd basically select a target and they would just take more damage. But what's really weird to me is she did used to have Tormented Soil, so she used to have 2 damage over time abilities when she first launched, which is why I'm sure they eventually swapped out her old Dark Binding with her new Dark Binding, and then made her old Dark Binding the first part of Soul Shackles, which is kind of like an interesting history piece on Morgana on where that ultimate came from. We're moving on now to number 4, which is Fiddlesticks and his old passive Paranoia. Paranoia reads, Fiddlesticks' mere presence is enough to cause fear in his enemies, causing them to miss on their attacks. Enemies within his aura have a chance to miss on each attack. Applies to minions and turrets. This is another really interesting part of Old League where there was a lot more RNG or chance elements in the game. I'm sure tons of you know about the old dodge mechanic with Jax or a bunch of champions where you could essentially just miss your attacks. But I can just imagine the idea of being so close to killing a Fiddlesticks, or he tower dives you and then the tower shot misses or your ability misses, just being so infuriating to play against. And the fact that it has no counterplay just adds to that frustration. Okay, we are now moving into the top 3, and at number 3, we have Teemo with his old R, Scout's Bounty. His old R reads, Teemo selects a target champion for 30 seconds. If they die during that time, Teemo gains extra gold. So essentially, this was a point-and-click debuff that Teemo could use to get extra gold if he got a kill, and I believe it also reduced armor from reading some posts on Reddit about this ability. But yeah, not anything like his current ultimate, Noxus Trap. This ability is just so boring for Teemo. Like, comparing it to what Teemo ended up having with Noxus Trap, it's just not even close. And thinking of Teemo's kit as it is, like if you just had Blinding Dart, Move Quick, the damage over time poison, and then if you had Scout's Bounty, Teemo feels like a really bad champion. As annoying as it is as well, you can't deny that Noxus Trap is one of the most iconic abilities in the game. You really can't imagine Teemo without it. And so I think that this change was definitely for the better. At second place on our list, we have Rise and his old W, Mana Leech. Mana Leech reads, Rise's attacks siphon mana off of enemy units, bestowing it upon himself. I can't think of any other character that steals mana from other champions, and I'm honestly kind of surprised Riot never played around with that idea more inside the game. But having an on-hit ability on a mage just seems kind of like a waste of a slot. And I'm sure that's why they ended up changing his kit around so that he didn't end up having Mana Leech. The concept is really cool. The idea of Rise being able to steal mana is really cool because he's like a really mana-hungry battle mage. But I think in practice, this ability was probably very bad. And lastly, at number 1, with the weirdest lost ability I could find, we have Kayle. Kayle's old E used to be Intervention. It was an active ability that read, Targeted Buff, castable on any friendly champion. Decreases the gold loss from death and reduces the amount of time spent dead. Now, this ability is cool for a myriad of reasons. Up first, you've got decreases the gold loss from death, which sounds really strange because you don't lose gold when you die in League. As many of you know though, League of Legends was originally based on Dota, and in Dota, you do lose gold when you die. So I'm assuming that when the game was early in alpha or maybe even beta, you did lose gold when you die, and this ability helped to decrease that, which is really interesting. And then you have the second part of this ability, which is reduces the amount of time spent dead. Obviously today we have Akshan with his W passive on how that just straight up revives, like could revive your entire team basically. So the fact that this ability used to just reduce one champion's time spent dead seems pretty bad, but it's still just such an interesting thing. Like we've never seen anything like this in the game since then, and we most likely never will. Either way though, this ability is still super interesting to read, and I honestly think it was probably pretty useless. But the fact that something like this was in the game where you could decrease the gold loss and reduce time spent dead is just so interesting and cool to read and hear about. And I hope you found this ability interesting as well as the other 9 we talked about in today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. And if you've been liking my content recently and want to see more of me in your feed, it would mean the absolute world if you could subscribe. We're going for 10,000 subscribers before the end of the year, and around 98% of you guys who watch currently aren't subbed, so I really think we can do it with just a little bit of a push. And hey, if you want to watch more of my stuff, click on the video on screen right now where I tried Faker's World's Training Schedule for 5 days.